Hi, welcome. I'm Dr. Sally. It's good to see you all again. This week, I want to talk a little bit about our textbook that we're using in this class, The Artist's Way. And I also wanted to give a little rationale, not only for this text, but for this class in general. So you can have a little bit more of an idea of what to expect. And also, you can start thinking about how to apply the concepts and theories that we're learning in this class to your constructive actions, to your personal lives, and to your future careers. So hopefully that will become more clear by the end of this video. So I wanted to introduce you to The Artist's Way. I asked you guys to order this book this week. So your first assignment in this book will be next week. And I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to key concepts, what the author calls the basic tools of this workbook. So let me be really clear. This book is not going to teach you how to become a painter or a musician or even a writer. What this book does is that it provides tools and exercises to help every individual sort of expand their creativity and to work past certain blocks that we all have for realizing our fullest potential. It's interesting that the first sentence on the back of this book says, "The Artist's Way is an empowering book for aspiring and working artists." And I think that's really interesting because this class is, empowerment through the arts. And so I'm hoping that this becomes a way, engaging in these practices becomes a way for you to understand through firsthand experience what it's like to engage in creative practices. So, as we know, the cornerstone of Metropolitan College of New York is purpose-centered action, purpose-centered education. And that means, taking what you're learning in the classroom and applying it to your personal and professional lives, taking the tools and going out there and seeing how they work. So that's very much what this textbook is about. And so I think it's an interesting choice for us to sort of work throughout the course of the semester. The TED Talk that I asked you guys to watch for this week, the Elizabeth Gilbert talk on sort of this notion of creative genius, that Gilbert actually said that her book, Eat, Pray, Love, never would have existed if it wasn't for this book. So there's literally millions of people who've gone through this coursework in the last several decades, and a lot of well-respected artists, aspiring artists, and people who are just trying to sort of release blocks to make themselves more effective. People have used this book. So I wanted just to briefly introduce the contents. As you can see, each chapter is basically addressing a different type of block or fear or limitation that we have when exploring our creative spirit. Recovering a sense of safety, recovering a sense of identity, recovering a sense of power. So when you look at the topics that arise in each chapter, topics such as productivity, success, listening, unearthing buried dreams, you can sort of see how those topics could be things that apply to your personal lives, things that apply to your professional lives. And so this book is going to sort of like help you work through those things to fully realize your dreams and help you realize your potential. So again, getting past some of those blocks. I'm sure some of you have had that experience before where you sit down to write a paper and you just, something happens and you can't get anything out. And that's what's called a writer's block, as we've all experienced, I'm sure. So this book is an extended exercise in getting us to get past those types of blocks, to having specific tools to help us get through those blocks. So I think it's very interesting and very applicable to sort of getting through school, getting through moving forward in your career, and of course your personal life. So I wanted to talk over a bit of an overview on the basic tools, because these are the tools that the author asks you to engage in every week. And so there's two basic aspects of the basic tools. Number one is morning pages. Number two is the artist's date. And I'll talk about those in a minute. But basically, each chapter is covering a topic and asks the reader to do a couple of exercises about that topic. In addition to that, every week you're asked to maintain your morning pages and your artist date. So let's talk a little bit about what those look like. So if you have your textbook already, I'm going to invite you to turn to the chapter called The Basic Tools. And this is on page 10. So the morning pages are, when you get up in the morning, you write stream of consciousness for 3 pages. Now, before you say, I don't have time, this is the notebook that I've chosen to use for my morning pages. As you can see, it's not extremely large. And when I did my morning pages this morning, it took me less than 10 minutes. So schedule that time in when you're having breakfast, when you're on the train, anytime you can fit it in on the go. 3 pages a day. Do as many as you can a week, ideally 7 days, but if you can do at least 3 days a week, half the week, that will suffice for the class. As the author says on page 10, there is no wrong way to do morning pages. So it's basically your stream of consciousness. If you sit down and write a list of things you have to do for that day, then those are your morning pages for that day. If you sit and write about how much you think this is a waste of your time and you've got work to do and you've got money to make, then those are your morning pages for the day. So don't monitor yourself. Anything that you write is okay. On page 11, she says, the morning pages are the primary tool of creative recovery. And so she talks about in the introduction about, trust that if you use these tools, you will have a breakthrough. Something will happen. So that's her rationale for the morning pages. She says that they're not negotiable. So in other words, you can't just read this book and not do the morning pages and the artist date, because they are the very foundation of the class. It's like taking a PE class and not engaging in any of the exercise. So think of these as exercises that will get you to a fitter spirit, if you want to call it that way. Now, just a quick note on her emphasis on spirit, and she uses the word God in her introduction, though she makes it clear that you don't have to believe in a God or God with a capital G to benefit from this program. And so if you want to know and hear more about what she means by that, you can turn to the Spiritual Electricity, the Basic Principles, for a discussion of how she thinks creativity is a way to communicate with our Creator. It's a way of moving us to what our true essence is as human beings. So if you're interested in that, check that out. The second main activity that she's asking us to engage in every week is an artist date. Now, I want you to go ahead and turn to page 18 and 19 if you have your textbooks, and if not, you can look at this when you get them. And this is how she defines it. An artist date is a block of time set aside and committed to nurturing your creative consciousness, your inner artist. In its most primary form, the artist date is an excursion, a play date that you pre-plan and defend against all interlopers. If you think this sounds stupid or that you will never be able to afford the time, identify that reaction as a resistance. You cannot afford not to find time for the artist dates. And so she talks a little bit more about the rationale behind this, but the idea is that the artist is in you is a child, and that child needs to go out and have fun, and can't really just be left on their own. Your artist needs to be taken out, pampered, and listened to. There are as many ways to evade this commitment as there are days of the week. I am too broke is the favorite one. So in here, she gives examples of what artist dates can look like, and they don't have to cost money, and they don't necessarily have to be an exorbitant amount of time. You don't have to spend an entire day at the Metropolitan Museum of Art to have a fulfilling artist date. On page 19, she expands what some of these can look like. Spending time in solitude with your artist child is essential to self-nurturing. A long country walk, a solitary expedition on the beach for a sunrise or sunset, a sortie out to a strange church to hear gospel music, to an ethnic neighborhood to taste foreign sights and sounds. Your artist might enjoy any of these, or your artist might like bowling. So commit yourself to a weekly artist date and then watch your killjoy side try to wiggle out of it. Watch how the sacred time gets easily encroached upon. Watch how the sacred time suddenly includes a third party. Learn to guard against these invasions. So to the best you can, I understand that you have families and you have commitments and you have jobs, and you don't have your entire weekend to necessarily spend at a formal museum, for instance. But the examples that I just gave and the examples she gives in the book, taking time out to watch a movie, taking time out to consciously listen to music during your subway ride, thinking about ways to plan these activities and then consciously engage in them in a way where you're really paying attention to the art that you're absorbing. So those are the two main components, the basic tools of this text. And as I said, each chapter, she gives us a couple of tasks and exercises, and they're really just lists and things like that. It's not an exorbitant amount of work. So every week you'll engage in this, and then on Moodle you will respond to a forum post that asks you to look at the tasks you engaged in, and how many morning pages you did, how it went, what your artist date was. But the main point of this is to engage in the activities. So I wanted to talk a little bit about academic integrity before we moved on to the rationale for this class. So there is something which represents academic misconduct that's called fabrication. So fabrication is when you make something up. You make up an internship. You make up data for a test that you're supposedly conducting. Or you make up that, for instance, in this case, that you went on an artist date or that you engaged in your daily activities when you didn't. So that's an example of fabrication, and it does carry the same weight as other examples of academic dishonesty. So I'm sure you have heard of plagiarism in your classes, and plagiarism is using someone else's words as if they are your own. And plagiarism oftentimes happens unintentionally. So you're sort of, looking for sources online, and you find an article that you think is really interesting, and you're taking notes, and you accidentally, copy it down word for word, so that when you put it in your paper, and your teacher says, "Where did this come from? You didn't write this," and you say, "Yes, I did." If you are citing what somebody else says, and it's more than 3 words in a row of what they said, you have to put in a citation and you have to put that text in quotation marks. Sometimes students think that as long as they cited where they found it, that that's enough. But in fact, anytime you take language out directly from another source, you have to put it in quotation marks. So I wanted to bring this up because a lot of the work that you're asked to do in this class is looking at a piece of artwork and telling me what you think about it. There's no reason why you need to research that on the internet, or why you would even want to see what other people have to say about it. Sometimes we get tempted when we run out of time, when we're super busy and we're trying to get our work done. We get tempted to use things that we find on the internet. And I know from having taught for a long time now, over a decade of full-time teaching at MCNY, that there are multiple reasons for why students plagiarize, and some of them are malicious and some of them aren't. But I think the thing that makes me the most disconcerted as a teacher and as an educator is the fact that students go to somebody else to validate their ideas. And that to me is a real tragedy. I really am deeply interested in what you think about the material that we're going to be studying in this class. And I think that, sometimes, and hopefully our textbook is going to help us with this, sometimes we think that what we have to say or our opinions are not valid. And I'm here to tell you that they are. So please do not use the internet to answer any questions. If you post something on Moodle in a forum that you did not write, I will be able to tell. And, there's a couple things that can happen when we engage in academic dishonesty. And I'm going to invite you to go back to your syllabus and see what some of those things are. So all of that said, I want to talk a little bit about the rationale for this class. And there's 4 main topics I want to talk about, and hopefully some of those will resonate with you. First of all, we all consume culture and art and express ourselves artistically every single day. Think about how you dress. Think about the music you listen to. Think about how you seek entertainment. All of these are examples of personal use of art. And so what we're doing in this class is we are actually taking a microscope and looking at things that we do every day, and we sort of take it for granted that we dress in a way that represents our style, or we dress in a way that identifies us in a cultural subgroup, for instance. If clothing didn't matter, if the aesthetics of our appearance didn't matter, then we would all dress the same. We would all have the same haircut. But the fact of the matter is, the way you present yourself out into the world is an individual choice that stems from the fact that you like the way those shoes look, for instance. So, again, this is something that we do every day. And this class will just get us to sort of look at a little more critically those things that we sort of do, quote unquote, naturally. The second thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is related to our reading for this week, and that's the idea of communication. Tolstoy argues in What is Art that art is able to transmit a feeling, that it's able to communicate something from the person who made the artwork to the person who's looking at it. So that transmission of a feeling, he uses the term, it infects the viewer. that's a really powerful way to get your ideas out there. So whether what you want to communicate is the feelings for your boyfriend in a love song, or whether what you want to communicate is that you think the government is corrupt and you want to display a political message, like Bertolt Brecht, German playwright, did. He believed that people should come out of the theater and revolt in the street. And he called this epic theater. All right. So regardless of the thing that you want to communicate, whether it's something personal, whether it's something that's gnawing on you, whether you simply want to express an appreciation of beauty, or whether what you want to express has a political end, art is able to communicate, and it does it in a way that can be really, really powerful. And we'll look at some examples of that this semester. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is the skills, some of the skills that you're going to learn in this class. Depending on what your major is, you may not see the value of taking a class about the arts. You may be frustrated and angry that you have to take this class. How is studying art going to help me become a better human service professional? How is studying art going to help me become a good business person or an entrepreneur? Or how is art going to help me work in the healthcare field? And my answer to that is twofold. One, I am convinced that effective human service professionals and people who work in the healthcare industry and business people, the most effective ones, the ones that you look to as your gurus for guidance, chances are they are creative. They come up with new ideas. They come up with innovative ways to streamline, to make things more effective, to reach more customers, to help more people. So creativity is embedded, I think, in all fields at the highest level. The second thing is what some call soft skills. So hard skills are, say you're a business major and you have to study microeconomics and macroeconomics. You're learning what are considered hard skills related to a particular field or a particular discipline. In human services, you learn, for instance, some basic psychology and counseling skills that you then can go and apply to the workplace. So those are more specific skills that you have to learn to work in a particular field. Soft skills are skills that that are not particular to a particular discipline. So let me give you some examples and perhaps it'll be more clear. Soft skills can include communication skills, writing skills, having empathy for others, working effectively in groups, creative problem solving to come up with solutions to real world problems. Those are all examples of quote unquote soft skills that are developed in classes like this class and like some of your other common curriculum classes. And they actually have a real value. There was an interesting study done by AAC&U where they interviewed employers about what they wanted from future employees. And 93% of them said that that these skills, the soft skills of being able to write effectively, communicating in oral and written form, were more important than necessarily what the student majored in. So these are skills that are important to develop um, regardless of your major, but also regardless of the field that you want to go into. So I think that this class is actually getting us to hone our critical thinking skills in ways that we may not have had the opportunity to do before. So I'm excited about us doing that together. And as that report from AAC and you indicated, these are actually employable skills. They will help you in the workplace. They will help you get a job, and they'll help you keep it and succeed. So I've talked about thus far three main things, sort of the personal aspect of art being something we consume every day, this idea that art can communicate in a way that is different from other mediums, and the development of soft skills, which has professional and personal implications and usefulness for all of us. And the last one I want to talk about, it's a little bit lofty, but I think it's important. And it's this idea that art is what makes us human. It taps us into our humanity. And Leo Tolstoy talked about that this week in the article that you were asked to read, What is Art? When he talks about art being the thing that makes us distinct, that makes us unique from other animals, the fact that we express and communicate through artistic production. So in this way, I consider art on the same level as philosophy or history or politics or government or the sciences or any of the other things that you might study while you are in college. To me, art being the thing that makes us human and that makes up humanity means that we have to study it because it is part of the thing that makes us who we are. And, just on that note, there was this interesting NPR episode I heard recently about a composer and a violinist named Simon Locks, who was taken and put into Auschwitz, the Nazi concentration camps. And when he was in the camps, he was forced to play violin, the thing that he loved, that was his life calling. He was forced to play violin for the other inmates of the concentration camp as they were escorted down to be exterminated. And he talks about this in a book that he wrote called Music and the World. And in it, he talks about art as, quote, the sublime expression of human experience, end quote. And he talks about it in a way that recognizes that this was a conflicted moment for him. The thing that brought him so much joy, music, brought comfort to other people, was also the thing that he was being forced to do. And so, at that moment, he wasn't able to resist per se. And, we can see other examples of this, of enslaved people, for instance, singing and, communicating with each other, and passing down their culture to future generations at that moment in which you are most broken and you feel like humanity has turned its back to you. At that moment is a moment where many people turn to art for comfort. They turn to art, again, to express themselves at a moment in which they might not be allowed to verbally or in other ways. And so these examples, of course, that I just mentioned are very extreme examples, but I think that they very importantly remind us that that art is something that many people find necessary to express. That it's part of what makes them a human being, and to be denied that in many ways is to be denied one's humanity. So just to summarize, in the video today, we went over some of the basic tools and the rationale, and what to expect from the Artist's Way textbook and this coursework. We talked a little bit about some of what you're expected to do as a student to avoid academic dishonesty. And lastly, we talked a little bit about the rationale for this course and why I think it is useful for you on a personal level, on a professional level, and on a human level. So thank you very much. I look forward to talking more about these ideas with you. Have a great day.